City of Lakes AmeriCorps reads. My name is Miss Sydney, and today we will be reading My Brother Martin by Christine King Farris, illustrated by Chris Soentpiet. This is a story about Christine's life growing up with her brother, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., or as she called him, ML. It starts with a quote from the Reverend. I have a dream that one day little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said that on August 28, 1963. Here is the title page. My Brother Martin, A Sister Remembers, Growing Up with the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Gather around and listen as I share childhood memories of my brother, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I am his older sister, and I've known him longer than anyone else. I knew him long before the speeches he gave, and the marches he led, and the prizes he won. I even knew him before he dreamed the dream that would change the world. And here is a photograph of Mrs. Christine King Farris. We were born in the same room, my brother Martin and I. I was an early baby, born sooner than expected. Mother dear and Daddy placed me in the chifforobe drawer that stood in the corner of their upstairs bedroom. I got a crib a few days afterward. A year and a half later, Martin spent his first night in that hand-me-down crib in the very same room. The house where we were born belonged to Mother dear's parents, our grandparents, the Reverend and Mrs. A.D. Williams. We lived there with them and our Aunt Ida, our grandmother's sister. And there's baby Martin with his sister Christine, his parents, his Aunt Ida, and his grandparents. And not long after my brother Martin, who we called ML because he and Daddy had the same name, our baby brother was born. His name was Alfred Daniel, but we called him AD after our grandfather. They called me Christine, and like 3 peas in 1 pod, we grew together. Our days and rooms were filled with adventure stories and tinker toys, with dolls and Monopoly and Chinese checkers. And although Daddy, who was an important minister, and Mother dear, who was known far and wide as a musician, often had work that took them away from home, our grandmother was always there to take care of us. I remember days sitting at her feet as she and Aunt Ida filled us with grand memories of their childhood and read to us about all the wonderful places in the world. There's Aunt Ida and Grandma and the 3 kids, and you can see all of their toys on the ground. And of course, my brothers and I had each other. We stuck together like the pages in a brand new book. And being normal young children, we were almost always up to something. Our best prank involved a fur piece that belonged to our grandmother. It looked almost alive, with its tiny feet and its little head and gleaming glass eyes. So, every once in a while, in the waning light of evening, we'd tie that fur piece to a stick, and hiding behind the hedge in front of our house, we would dangle it in front of unsuspecting passerbys. Boy, you could hear the screams of fright all across the neighborhood. So there are the kids in the hedge in front of their house, dangling that fur piece that their grandma used to wear around her neck. It kind of looks like a bunch of little animals. And here are their neighbors being super scared. I would be scared too. Then there was the time Mother Dear decided that her children should all learn to play piano. I didn't mind too much, but ML and AD preferred being outside to being stuck inside with our piano teacher, Mr. Mann, who would rap your knuckles with a ruler just for playing the wrong notes. Well, one morning, ML and AD decided to loosen the legs on the piano bench so we wouldn't have to practice. We didn't tell Mr. Mann, and when he sat, crash, down he went. So you can see Mr. Mann is looking very grumpy after he fell on the ground. The two boys are looking quite guilty in the corner, and Christine is about to burst into giggles. But mostly we were good, obedient children, and ML did learn to play a few songs on the piano. He even went off to sing with our mother a time or two. Given his love for singing and music, I'm sure he could have become as good a musician as our mother had his life not called him down a different path. But that's just what his life did. My brothers and I grew up a long time ago, back in a time when certain places in our country had unfair laws that said it was right to keep black people separate because our skin was darker and our ancestors had been captured in far-off Africa and brought to America as slaves. There's ML playing the piano as his mother and father look on, and the rest of his family sit on the couch listening. Atlanta, Georgia, the city in which we were growing up, had those laws. Because of those laws, my family rarely went to the picture shows means movies, or visited Grant Park with its famous cyclorama. In fact, to this very day, I don't recall ever seeing my father on a streetcar. Because of those laws and the indignity that went with them, Daddy preferred keeping ML, AD, and me close to home, where we'd be protected. We lived in a neighborhood in Atlanta that's now called Sweet Auburn. It was named for Auburn Avenue, the street that ran in front of our house. On our side of the street stood two-story frame houses similar to the one we lived in. Across it crouched a line of one-story row houses and a store owned by a white family. Here's an illustration of Auburn Street that looks super pretty with that gorgeous sunset in the background. When we were young, all the children along Auburn Street played together, even the two boys whose parents owned the store. And since our house was a favorite gathering place, those boys played with us in our backyard. Here they are playing tag and playing ball. Looks like a lot of fun. And ran with ML and AD to the firehouse on the corner, where they watched the engines and the firemen. The thought of not playing with those kids, because they were different, because they were white and we were black, never entered our mind. There they are, looking on at the firemen in that old-fashioned fire truck. Very different than the ones that we see today. Well, one day, ML and AD went to get their playmates from across the street, just as they had done 100 times before. But they came home alone. The boys had told my brothers that they couldn't play together anymore because AD and ML were Negroes. And that was it. Shortly afterward, the family sold the store and moved away. We never saw or heard from them again. Looking back, I realize it was only a matter of time before the generations of cruelty and injustice that Daddy and Mother Dear and Mama and Aunt Ida had been shielding from us finally broke through. But back then, it was a crushing blow that seemed to come out of nowhere. There's ML and his younger brother AD, two white boys that said they don't want to play with them anymore because the King brothers were black. "Why do white people treat colored people so mean?" ML asked Mother Dear afterward. And with me and ML and AD standing in front of her, trying our best to understand, Mother Dear gave the reason behind it all. Her words explained the streetcars our family avoided and the whites only sign that kept us off the elevator at City Hall. Her words told why there were parks and museums that Black people could not visit, and why some restaurants refused to serve us, and why hotels wouldn't give us rooms, and why theaters would only allow us to watch their picture shows from the balcony. But her words also gave us hope. She answered simply, because they just don't understand that everyone is the same, but someday it will be better. And my brother ML looked up into our mother's face and said the words I remember to this day. He said, "Mother Dear, one day I'm going to turn this world upside down." In the coming years, there would be other reminders of the cruel system called segregation that sought to keep Black people down. But it was Daddy who showed ML and AD and me how to speak out against hatred and bigotry and stand up for what's right. Daddy was the minister at Ebenezer Baptist Church, and after losing our playmates, when ML, AD, and I heard our father speak from his pulpit, his words held new meaning. There's Daddy preaching at the pulpit at their church. And Daddy practiced what he preached. He always stood up for himself when confronted with hatred and bigotry, and each day he shared his encounters at the dinner table. When a shoe salesman told Daddy and ML that he'd only serve them in the back of the store because they were Black, Daddy took ML somewhere else to buy new shoes. Another time, a police officer pulled Daddy over and called him boy. Daddy pointed to ML sitting next to him in the car and said, "This is a boy. I am a man, and until you call me one, I will not listen to you." These stories were as nourishing as the food that was set before us. Years would pass, and many new lessons would be learned. There would be numerous speeches and marches and prizes. But my brother never forgot the example of our father, or the promise he had made to our mother on the day his friends turned him away. And there's ML, all grown up, now known as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., leading a march against segregation. And when he was much older, my brother ML dreamed a dream. That turned the world upside down. And that's the end. Thank you so much for listening to My Brother Martin by Christine King Farris. I hope you enjoyed it.